Hi everyone! So in one of my earlier videos, I mentioned that my very first introduction to shamanism was through a Latin American folk healer that I found on Facebook. I craved more of this training. So a few weeks later, I spoke to my aunt and she told me about a shaman named Ray who she met at the Hallowed Center for Yoga. And he has his own school called Jaguar Path, which he runs with his wife, Nina. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to take the plunge. I wasn't sure if I wanted to spend the money or the time because it was months long. So I had been on a spiritual awakening journey for about a year by this point. And deep down, I knew that I was at the very beginning of a very profound, lifelong dedication to spirituality, but I didn't want to admit it because I was already being socially ostracized at this time. Like most healers and shamans and light workers, they tend to not follow a lot of established societal rules. One of my family members told me that I was a pain in the butt, and we are to people that want to control how we live our life. I subconsciously understood that if I invested in this school, I was choosing that path. I knew I wanted to do it. That's why I talked to my aunt about it. And that's why I trained with the folk healer. But I didn't want to admit that my soul chose a path that I would need to pave myself. A path that I knew that I had to walk alone, a path I was already starting to walk alone, a lifestyle that the people around me didn't even understand, a lifestyle that I was judged for. I still am. But then one night I had a dream. I was walking through a stone gate. It was like a stone wall, and then there was like a square stone entryway. There was an inscription on the top of the stone gate, and it said Jaguar on it. So when I woke up, I immediately understood that this training was a gateway that I had to walk through. It was time. The divine was calling me toward a particular path, and I had to take it. Whether I was going to be the town weirdo or not, I had to do it. So I did the training. It was based on Peruvian shamanism, and it closed with an amazing retreat to Costa Rica. About 6 months before I found this school, I lost a baby in a very traumatic way. Yeah, I developed early onset preeclampsia that progressed to the extremely dangerous HELLP syndrome. And I had an emergency C-section around 7 months pregnant. I got to spend 5 days with my newborn, my premature newborn, before she died in my arms of respiratory failure. And then shortly after she died, I ended my relationship with her father. 2 major endings, and it became a prolonged grief disorder, also called complicated grief. In hindsight now, 6 years later, I understand that this was due to extreme isolation. My child died smack dab in the middle of like the heat of COVID. My community circle that I normally would have leaned on was just very fearful. So when I enrolled in this school of shamanism, I was very broken, unsupported, and I was in desperate need of a place to heal. The Jaguar Path gave me that place and the tools to start healing myself, which is what true healers do. They show people how to heal themselves with the wisdom that they gained from healing themselves. And I distinctly remember when this course was over, telling them that I could finally feel my fingertips again. The reason for this is because prior to this, I wasn't occupying my body. In shamanism, this is called soul loss. It happens when we experience trauma that essentially scares us out of our body. In modern psychology, this would be considered dissociation. Through this training, I learned soul retrieval, how to get my whole self back into the physical vessel, which was the healing key for me personally. But the training was mostly focused on healing others as working shamanic healers. We were given the tools to be able to establish a shamanic healing practice where we take on clients. But naturally, as I touched upon before, you heal yourself while you are learning to heal others, and you learn to heal others while you're learning to heal yourself. We learned about the energy body and how to do energy clearing and extractions. We learned how to balance the chakra system and relax the nervous system. We learned some Ayurvedic medicine practices. We went over mythology and archetypes and divination and manifestation techniques. We learned how to communicate with clients in specific ways that allowed us to identify core wounds and energetic imbalances, right? So there are like certain words that are used. We learned to look at body language. Eventually, you get to a point as a healer, and I'm at that point now where I'm able to look at people and determine what emotional issues or childhood experiences might be underlying the surface that are causing some of the things that I'm seeing. We also learned about samskaras, which are the traumatic experiences that we have throughout our lives, which lead to confirmation bias and repetition compulsion. These aren't words that they used in the training. I'm just trying to associate these concepts with modern psychology terms. These thought processes that we develop as a result of these traumatic experiences then result in lifelong repeated patterns of negative behavior and experiences, which I've talked about in other videos on shadow work. That's why shadow work is so important. We're going to keep going through these loops of patterns and thought processes until we break that wheel. And trauma isn't always abuse or like danger or near-death experiences. One of the examples that was given in the shamanic training was that you could be a 5-year-old who dropped your ice cream cone on the playground and it was devastating. If there is a strong enough emotional component to what you're experiencing, if it's not released in the moment, if it's not properly addressed, it's going to get stored in the body. We also learned about parasitic and symbiotic relationships, the difference between those, and the importance of cutting cords. Parasitic relationships are those in which we are perpetually giving with minimal reciprocation, resulting in us persistently feeling depleted. This can happen a lot with parenting and is a very common feeling amongst any person who is in a caretaking role. But when we start experiencing burnout or constant emotional strain in any other relationship, that's not a caretaking role, right? These are considered parasitic. As a woman, I gotta say, if we're in a perpetual caretaking role of our husbands, we're behaving like their mothers, that's not gonna end well for our nervous system. We cannot come into our power. We cannot wield our own energy to its fullest extent, which is coming into our power, if we are constantly giving it away. This specific topic was obviously something I personally needed a lot of healing around. I mean, I went through this training as a shaman 6 years ago, and I haven't come into that role despite having the very real life experiences and formal training to do so. I didn't have the confidence to come into it until now. I had to discover the samskaras that were causing my tendency toward people pleasing, like perpetually my entire life. The reasons why I was constantly leaking my energy to people and finding myself in lopsided relationship dynamics that disempowered me. This is often the case with highly empathic people who have healing abilities, who have come here to become healers. When I was a child, I was so conscious. At the time, I couldn't articulate what it was that I was understanding, but as an adult, when I tap into those memories, I had a very in-depth understanding of my parents' emotional state, the nature of their relationships, why they behaved in the ways that they did, what was causing certain angry outbursts, why this was happening, who was causing that. There were details I picked up on at such young ages that when I remember these memories, I'm like, my God, I can't believe that I knew that was happening. So I'm really grateful to have these memories, because now when I interact with my own child, I'm like, she's going to remember this. She understands what's going on. We learn to minimize our own needs in order to improve the emotional well-being of the other person, or to protect the emotional well-being of the other people that we're around. Hence, the lifelong tendency to people please. But when you start learning boundaries, you start learning that the way other people feel is not your responsibility. You're not going to purposely hurt people, but you're also not going to set yourself on fire anymore to keep people from feeling bad. When an empath goes their entire life taking on other people's emotions, absorbing, fixing, abandoning self, abandoning your own needs, abandoning emotional requirements, you're nervous system starts to break down and you get sick. So a lot of future healers and shamans, they go through a sickness that catapults their healing. For me, it was getting sick while I was pregnant, and my liver failing, my body shutting down and unable to carry the pregnancy anymore, and almost dying in the hospital and losing my child. From our perspective, you think that you're hurting people if you choose yourself, if you choose boundaries, but the reality is you're just acting like a normal person. You're acting the way everybody else acts, but you view it as cruel because you could feel the emotional response from the other person. Becoming an empowered healer requires you to understand self versus non-self. Another thing that we learned was how to extract intrusive entities. When you go through traumatic experiences, it creates a hole in your energetic field. It's like you damage your energy body, and it allows entities to get in and attach themselves to you. And every traditional shamanic culture believes in this exact concept. This is not just Peruvian shamanism, this is worldwide. I mean, in Christianity, there are demons, but there's also intrusive thoughts that you create yourself that kind of become their own entity almost, like an egregore is what they call those. If you are really angry, if you've been wronged, if you've been hurt, if you've gone through trauma, or if you have deep fears about certain things, you end up with cyclical thought processes that manifest themselves as kind of their own entity, but really they're just your own demons, that you created yourself. So they're both internal and external. In this training, they teach us how to extract those. I mean, we don't like to talk about that aspect of spirituality, but where there is light, there is also darkness. And shaman, they're the ones that walk between both worlds. They know how to go into the dark, and they know how to guide you into the light. They stand at the threshold of both. They're the walker between worlds. They've got one foot in the dark, one foot in the light. That's a shaman. In order to effectively operate in darkness, in order to be able to see in darkness, in order to guide people out of it, the shaman had to go through painful experiences. How are you supposed to lead people out of the dark through the darkness to the light if you can't see where you're going? You need to be the torch, right? And we become the torch by healing from our own trauma so that we can then show other people how to do that. So if anybody's watching this and you're like, fuck my life, the power that you hold to help pull other people out of darkness is invaluable. This is priceless boot camp training. People need you. I wish I had taken myself more seriously, but all in divine timing, right? Anyway, so after months of this training, I obtained a certificate and became a shaman, which they call a Pampa Messiah, an earth keeper. But if we look at this from a higher lens, I've been a shaman for lifetimes already. Most people attracted to this kind of work, I would say in my opinion, have already had past life experiences with healing and energy work. We're just remembering it.